week's episode of ERASED, Satoru Fujinuma is still trapped in the present timeline, as it looks like we're getting ever closer to the reveal of who the true killer is, and they have made it painfully clear that he's got red eyes. So much information to take in this week's episode, which honestly I don't think was the best episode of the series, but I'm really interested to see where it's going to go from this point, especially the way this episode ended. Just what a great cliffhanger ending. It looks like another revival event is about to be triggered because of course we get to see the return of a blue butterfly. But in this episode we learn a lot. Apparently, Kaio Hinazuki was beaten mercilessly by her mother and boyfriend, tossed into a shed in the middle of a cold, snowy night, and she froze to death, and they basically covered up her death. What's so disturbing about all of this is just how oddly realistic it is. There's nothing overly elaborate about this death. It's just pure abuse, pure and simple, and frankly, it makes me a little sick to my stomach, as does this entire episode, because it does a really great job of showing the extreme paranoia that society goes through every day now. Everybody is afraid of everyone. There's like these huge trust issues with everyone, and the one scene that completely exemplified that the most in this episode was the scene where Satoru was walking in the park and he saw these two kids playing with a paper airplane, and they were not flying it very well, and that's when he decided to help them out and make better wings. It flew perfectly. It was a nice, make-you-feel-good scene, except that the onlooking parents saw this as something that was completely disturbing. What is an adult doing here in the middle of the day? They immediately assume he's a frickin' serial killer, just like his friend who is framed in this murder. This whole episode basically played with the theme of trust, and it did it in a really good way, especially with the final scene with the meeting between Irie and Satoru, because Irie at the end of last week's episode was caught in a burning house and was almost saved by Satoru when suddenly the manager comes out of nowhere, which is honestly kind of heroic at first until he claims that he's going to take all of the credit for this, which came across as actually kind of asshole-ish, in my opinion. Satoru decides to escape, but what's really important about this scene is that Irie actually slipped her cell phone into his pocket. This way the police couldn't get to it, and they're able to meet each other when she calls him at the end of the episode, which is a really nice tender moment between the two, because despite everything that's happened, she still trusts him completely, and he trusts her. There's a lot of really weird, tender, awkward moments between the two, which is frankly kind of nice as well, and it's a great contrast for the first half of the episode, which is frankly kind of disturbing. And then suddenly the police come out of nowhere, and then they just arrest him, and Irie is so upset with herself because she feels like she completely failed Satoru, and he just reassures her that no, that's not the case. I trust you if anything. Thank you so much for your help. What's funny about the scene is that it's triggered by his memory of what appears to be a Super Sentai warrior, a Power Ranger, if you will. So Satoru gets handcuffed, he's getting ready to be put into a cop car, and as he's walking, he sees this one creepy dude with an umbrella with red eyes, who he immediately assumes is probably the killer. The blue butterfly comes in, boom, that's the end of the episode. Now, what's really important about this one is that we're already starting to get candidates for who the killer could be. There was a character who was introduced in this episode who also had red eyes, who's also the friend of Satoru's mother who worked at the TV station, and he actually provides a lot of information about the true death of Kaio Hinazuki to Satoru. He knows a lot of information, and that already makes him a really big suspect. It seems at first that his intentions are pure, but that very well could be him at the end of the episode, although there are some minor differences. The thing is, now we're going to have to look out for people with red eyes, which I have to admit is kind of cheesy. I mean, who's going to trust the guy with creepy red eyes, you know? So what's the rundown on this week's episode of ERASED? Nothing too spectacular here, but like I said, this whole episode played with the theme of trust in a lot of different areas, not just the obvious one at the very end with Irie and Satoru, but even the scene with Irie and her mother, with her not trusting her at first, but then actually being swayed by her, and actually helping her out in the end in the hospital. That was a pretty important scene. For me, personally, my favorite part of this episode was definitely the end when you had that great meeting between Satoru and Irie, and then that final scene with the blue butterfly flying overhead, letting you know that revival is about to be triggered. It just really gets me excited to see how the next episode is going to work, because is he going to be traveled back to being a kid again? Is it going to go to a couple of minutes ago so that they can prevent these events from happening? Is he ever going to be able to return to the past? Maybe he'll go to the future. Who knows? The space-time continuum has officially been wrecked in this week's episode, and yet I still can't take my face away from the screen. This was another fantastic episode of Erased, which any fan of the manga or anime should definitely check out. We are at the halfway point of the series, and things are only going to get more exciting from here. So I'm going to give this week's episode a 4 out of 5. A little slow in some parts, but that ending was really exciting. If you watched this week's episode of Erased, make sure to tell me what you thought about it in the comment section below. Who is the red-eyed killer? Is it the character who was introduced in this episode? Is it someone we haven't seen before? Is the red-eye thing just a red herring in general and just a stylistic choice? We'll just have to wait and see, but make sure to tell me what you want to see from the rest of this series in the comment section below. You guys are awesome! Thank you for watching this review, and make sure to like and subscribe, and follow us on social media. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby!